Hello again. I'd like to talk about the events that occurred during the G8, particularly the events in London, but I'd also like to talk about the continuing thing in Turkey and also what's happened in Brazil, what's transpired there. It's all happened over a very short period of time. Obviously, I'd like to talk about the G8 to begin with because it happened here, as they say. The great irony of it was, I suppose, is that as the Turkish people were fighting the police in the streets and so on, here the police were out on the streets as well with armoured cars. They had those armoured lorries and armoured trucks with 1,250 police, if you believe the Daily Mail, on duty to combat about 200 to 300 anarchists who were mostly kids, activists, and a few homeless people as well. So the overwhelming force of the state was brought in against just a load of kids. A lot of the stuff was propaganda, particularly about the guy who the police saved from jumping on the roof. Well, me and friends of mine were talking to him a couple of days afterwards, and the police did not save him. He wasn't jumping off the roof. He was just trying to get away from them. That's what he said. And they beat him up, of course. He had the bruises to prove it, but we saw it on the television anyway. So that's what happened there in that roof. But what happened in the building, I've heard some very strange things as well about extreme force being used against people that are only teenagers, could offer no resistance. And in fact, there was no resistance. The police, I suppose, heard that there were rumours that there was weapons in there. Well, where were these weapons then? They were not produced, were they? Because there wasn't any weapons. And if the people had gone there with the intention of smashing up the West End, how comes not a single window was smashed? No police were assaulted. No, there were no injuries on the police or anything like that. No members of the public were assaulted by accident or otherwise. There was no violence at all, except from the police, who, again, were hitting people. Somebody I know, for example, was suffering from a concussion, and they'll probably be suffering for a few more weeks from it before they're better. Reason? Because they were punched on the side of the face by a police officer. Needless to say, they weren't actually doing very much at the time. So this level of brutality and so on, which just seems to be ignored by our media and so on, is part of the declaration of the state against its own people, really. But I'd like to go into that further. But I would like to say this as well, that the police are very lucky. 10 years ago, we'd have got about 4,000 or 5,000 people, and by God, there would have been broken windows and cars set on fire. But that was 10 years ago, or more maybe. But now, it's quite obvious there was going to be no violence whatsoever, and yet the police acted with, I'd say, more than overwhelming force. It's ironic, isn't it, that we can get out like 200 or 300 people. So look at the mathematics of it. There's about 4,500 multi-millionaires in London, as I've said before, growing by the week. And so for every multi-millionaire, there was like about, 50 or 100 of us out. That's how degenerate this country has become. That's what's going on. We've got more millionaires. We've got the millionaires outnumbering the protesters now. And then, of course, there's the police, who are the law unto themselves. There was a lot of harassment afterwards, a lot of zealous policing and so on, the police standing outside buildings and so on all day. Again, nothing occurred and nothing happened. They had a kind of what you might call a fluffy protest down in Canary Wharf on a Friday. And they had just about lost count of the number of police vans, and this is an entirely peaceful event. I suppose they could count themselves lucky they were allowed to protest. Well, anyway, that is very demoralising and so on. But I don't blame the people that organised the anti-G8 demos for failing to get out thousands of people. I think that reflects the situation of the public opinion over here, where people ain't got the guts to come out for whatever reason. Every week there's scandal and brutality and layoffs and evictions and so on, and yet we just lay down and take it like we like it. We're like some sort of Pekingese dog, like laying on his back, kicking up his little legs in ecstasy as his tummy stroked and so on. That's what we're just rolling over and taking it. But we're not having our little tummy stroked or anything like that. And we're not given like chicken breasts for dinner. The situation for us is getting worse and worse, and will continue to get worse. I can only see one result on it, and it's one result that we're all praying for, and that we hope that people actually get fed up with it and come out onto the streets, such as they were doing in Turkey. At the very time where the police were brutalising kids, the Turkish people were out facing water cannons, tear gas, extreme police brutality, baton rounds and so forth. Contrast the reaction of the Turkish people to the reaction of the British people, who can't even be bothered to get out and fucking do anything. It makes me really sick, but I'm not disillusioned. We know that sooner or later it's going to happen. People will come out. It'll be due to some trivial reason, as it always is, because look what happened in Brazil. Brazil, all we know is samba bands and carnival, and the World Cup and the Olympics and so on. The great media event, these happy, smiling, contented people in their booming economy and so on. The police are cleaning up the favelas. Everything's all right. Where everything's not all right, it seems, as originally what sparked off Brazil was a protest against price hikes on the buses. Public transport, what it is, I'd imagine. The police overreacted against the demonstration and sort of beat people up, fired tear gas at them and all this sort of stuff. Well, the result was there was over 2 million people in one day out on the streets. Who were these people? I actually, looking at the crowds and looking at the slogans that they were doing and their flags and so on, I'd say that this was a spontaneous uprising by the ordinary Brazilian people. They seem to be predominantly lower middle class. The amount of politicos amongst them seem to be very small indeed. I did hear there was a black bloc that did some damage and so on, but I actually think that that's, while I'd be cheering that on heartily from the sidelines, I think that was quite an irrelevance when you have like 2 million people out on the streets who did fight the police, who did put up barricades, who did trash government offices and so on, particularly in Brasilia, where the capital is. I mean, it was a very hearty thing, and what were the people actually saying? Why were they out on the streets? Because they were fed up. They didn't say they were against the World Cup or the Olympics. They said that they were against like the amount of spending that's going in, when they need hospitals, when they need education, when they need housing and things like that. And they were also protesting against the corruption of the Workers' Party. Now, if this was happening in Venezuela, you might suspect it might be some sort of CIA plot, and probably they will be somewhere there lurking behind it, trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government, as they've tried. But this in Brazil is not a right-wing, petty bourgeois uprising against the left, or what is perceived as the left. It's a genuine people's uprising, or the beginnings of a people's uprising, or mass protest against the whole Brazilian state and establishment, particularly the police. And a lot of the complaints are about police brutality and so on. Now, there is police brutality in Brazil, as there are police roaming the slums just killing people. Just particularly homeless kids are being assassinated by squads of police murderers, like they are in Mexico and so on, vigilantes. But this is going on all the time, and it's been going on under the Workers' Party as much as it was the Conservatives that ruled before them. So I think that Brazil is quite interesting. It shows, like, you know, that the people can come out spontaneously in the millions. The government said, all right, we're going to we won't put up the fares, hoping that people would go back home. But it was too late. And even if they do go back home, they'll be out again. Mark my words. And it seems to be Brazil, Turkey, Tunisia, Egypt, probably other spots in the world we don't hear about. That's the media for you. Something's in the news, it gets headlines, and 2 days later it's forgotten. We don't hardly see anything about Turkey now. And last Saturday there was vicious clashes between the police and the protesters, using water cannon and tear gas and so on to disperse them. So yeah, I mean, I'd see this part of this new movement that's taking part in the world that's not controlled by political parties, by Marxists or anything like that. And I don't think that's. I think the other thing that's very interesting is a lot of people have absolutely lost faith with the state or the government to deliver anything anyway. And this is a message that, and also as well, particularly in Turkey and probably in Brazil in the not too distant future, they're protesting against the arrogance of their state, the arrogance of their politicians and so on as well. And they just want them to go. And the arrogant politicians say, oh, I got elected. I've been re-elected. You're the ones that are anti-democratic and so on. Well, they're the ones that have been threatening to send in the army. And in Brazil as well, they threatened to send in the army as well. In Turkey, they threatened to send in the army. Could be a mistake there. In Brazil, they've threatened to send in the army. Well, as I say, you know, the president is a ex-lefty, an ex-sort of guerrilla or something like that. Someone that was highly illegal during that period of repression. And now they're doing exactly the same thing. Which goes to show, oh, that's another thing as well about her government. They've been accused of extreme corruption, which is not only taking bribes and stuff like that, but also of buying votes. So the Workers' Party is actually buying votes. Like they do in Albania, they buy votes, they pay you money to vote for them. You know, it's an old Ward thing that goes right back to America, Chicago, New York, the Tammany Hall type politics that they're operating. So yeah, we had the G8 here. As I say about the people that organise it and so on, and the kids that went to it and so on, I've got no criticism of them. I just criticise the rest of the population for ignoring it and not only ignoring the G8 thing, right, maybe they didn't hear anything about it, wasn't exactly well publicised, was it? But for ignoring every slap in the face that they get every day by refusing to come out on the street spontaneously like they do in Turkey and Brazil. But wait, don't worry, everything's okay, because this Saturday the mould of British politics was broken. In Westminster Central Hall, about 4,000 or 5,000 people, or mugs I should say, who paid a vast amount of money to attend this function, went to a so-called People's Assembly. Now, I've never heard of any part in history in any part of the world of people attending the People's Assembly having to pay 20 odd quid to get in to see it. And it had the same old tired lineup of Tony Benn and superannuated Labour politicians, union bureaucrats and so on. What a bunch. And on the very same day, would you believe, Miliband, the leader of the Labour Party, made a speech emphasising the fact that he would adhere to the Conservative fiscal policies. I think they're going to cut another 11.5 billion from public spending tomorrow or something. They're going to announce that they're doing that. And when you come to think of it, 85 billion was wiped off for shares for absolutely no reason whatsoever in last week. So them attempting to, it's like they're all furiously attempting to bail out the Titanic as it sinks. We know what's going to be the end result. It's going to end up at the bottom of the ocean. But they're bailing out, they're throwing us overboard to lighten the load. That's what they're doing. Anyway, I'd like to get back to this People's Assembly thing. So on the one hand, you had all these people where they want the Tories out, they want the cut stop, they want like sort of socialism reintroducing and blah, blah, blah. And what are they saying? Vote Labour. That's the only politics they've got. Vote Labour and we'll have another People's Assembly in another 8 months or whenever it is they're going to do it. Great stuff, folks. I also heard that Ken Loach, the famed film director, was there and was one of the dissident voices. And he was refused an opportunity to speak because he was criticising the Labour Party, or going to criticise the Labour Party, and they're just the same as the Tories. And he was going to suggest setting up a new political party, probably along the lines of the old Labour Party, after all, he just made a documentary about the Labour Party victory in 1945, which I haven't seen and probably would send me into a deep coma were I to watch it. But he is one of our few directors that makes films about working class things. Kes is a masterpiece. Now, he's greatly respected for his work on film and television, and I think his work, I don't particularly like it all that much. I do like Kes, but I think all his films are worth watching, and I think that they're a cut above most other British films which are made today or have been made in the not too distant past. But he was not allowed to speak because he was criticising the Labour Party, because he had the tenacity, the cheek to suggest that maybe we need a new political party. So what I'm trying to say here is that the left, who are in cahoots with this People's Assembly, you've got Counterfire, you've got the Communist Party, they're all there. This People's Assembly is nothing more than what you might call a recruiting pool for the left. Or it might be something else of a big pool that they all want to control. So the People's Assembly is basically not a People's Assembly. It's a thing where you pay 20 quid to listen to a load of union and Labour bureaucrats, where you've got absolutely no decision about what's done, and there's absolutely no dissent tolerated. It's got more in common with Kim Il-jung's North Korea than it has anything democratic, if you want my opinion. So there we are, the People's Assembly, the riposts from the left to the crisis and the Conservative coalition government. What a load of old crap. It's never going to achieve anything, doesn't want to achieve anything apart from electing Labour, and if you consider that achieving anything, then you're a bit of a mug, really. So where does this leave us? Well, obviously, anarchists, and we're willing to take to the streets, as was shown a couple of weeks ago, even if there's only a few hundred of us, and we are willing and capable, even though heavily outnumbered, of doing what we wanted to do, which was to, in this case, protest. I mean, there were other things that went on after Wednesday, but they got no mention at all in the press. The whole event was a bit of an education for me as well, not about the police or anything like that, but I met some quite interesting people, and I learned some things that I didn't know before. And so for me, I suppose in the end I gained out of it. It did put my faith back into the sort of movement I spend most of my time attacking, my own, to a degree, just because the people there were nice. Not fluffy, not spiky, but just nice and well-meaning. And despite all the police intimidation, it didn't work because the people weren't scared, and they came out the next day and the day after. So there. So here in England, it's difficult to say about England, isn't it? I mean, it's the rest of the world's up in flames. Within the next podcast, there'll probably be some sort of uprising somewhere else, or it'll take another shape in the places where it's happening. And what will happen with us? Well, we'll be concerned about the royal baby, and we'll be concerned about will Murray win Wimbledon. Well, I wouldn't pay any money on it if I was. That's it, isn't it? We had, like, last night and the night before, they had hundreds of people camping out to get tickets for Wimbledon for 2 days. Camping out for 2 days to get a ticket for Wimbledon. Haven't they got anything better to do with their time? No wonder we ain't got a revolution in this country if the population is that stupid. These middle class people, the equivalent of these middle class people that were queuing, camping out for tickets, were on the streets demanding their rights, demanding like an end to government corruption and arrogance, demanding an end to fare increases, to the declining standards of living, or the fact that they're not getting anything out of the boom economy in Brazil. And what are we doing? As I said, Royal Baby, Wimbledon, it just goes on and on and on and on. You know, if I was young, I would emigrate. Probably to a really repressive society, a really repressive country, because I know that I would have the joy of seeing an uprising occur. But here, well, I don't know. I mean, I know it's going to happen. And we talk about it all the time amongst ourselves. We can't make it happen. Anarchists. The left, certainly, well, they're not going to make it happen. They're going to try and stop it, aren't they? Oh, you might jeopardise the chances of Labour getting elected in the next election. Oh, you know, big deal. No, it's going to come, as it always does, as it did in Brazil, as it came in Turkey and everywhere else, with something completely insignificant. Completely insignificant. Overzealous police sort of beating up a youth or something in front of a whole load of children coming out of school or something, or anything. Anything at all could spark it off, and it might not necessarily be here in London. You might have all the police here in London. Remember, they've been saying that they've got, you know, they'll have the water cannon ready. They're expecting trouble this summer and so on and so forth. Well, I mean, there is no evidence that there's going to be any trouble. There's no talk on the streets on it at the moment. Although I'll tell you what there is talk of. People are deeply dissatisfied. People before were like kind of scared. And a lot of people are scared they're going to lose their jobs, they're going to lose their house. But now they're like really pissed off and really dissatisfied. And we'll see where that goes. And I think it just needs one spark to bring it. And I don't necessarily think it will happen in London. It might happen up north, where the situation as regards wages, living conditions, just about everything is far worse than it is down here in the south. Although there are huge pockets of poverty and discontent in the south, so you know it might kick off in Hastings or somewhere like that. You just don't know, but it will kick off. But we can't say where and when. All I can say before I finish is I hope that we have some bloody good weather this summer, because there's two things you can be sure. One, you get better riots the better the weather is, and two, you get better rights under Conservatives. So, David, if I had a choice between Ed and you, I would definitely vote for you, right? Because if I was forced to vote, I would definitely vote for David Cameron, because I know that we'll have some really good riots and so on. Or not even riots, but, you know, I'm not calling for riots, but I am calling for an uprising. I'm calling for thousands and millions of people to say, we've had enough, too much, we can't take any more, and just to take to the streets. And from there, we'll begin the politics. And it will be without the left, and if necessarily without us. I'd be quite happy if we just dissolved ourselves into the crowd and agitated as like just members of the crowd and members of the mob, which is basically what we are. We just talk about it and interpret it a bit more than other people, and anticipate it with glee a bit more than other people. So I would like to talk about the police infiltration of the various things. There's going to be a big scandal about the Lawrence family. It's just hit the headlines today. Within a week or so, it's going to go stratospheric. I'm not saying that this is going to cause millions of people to come out on the streets, but what I'm saying is that I would like to say something about the secret state and so on, about all this infiltration and the sort of mentality about it. But I'll save that for the next one. And so therefore, in the fading light of the evening, I wish you good night, and I hope to see you, everybody that's watching this, out on the streets when the time comes, which hopefully will be soon. All right.